Hi, everybody. Welcome to the caregiver training presentation today. We have a guest, and I'd like to welcome Kayla. She's going to talk about a survey that we'd like to get everybody to participate in. So Kayla, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about this.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. Good afternoon, folks. Appreciate you making some time to hear from me today. My name is Kayla Shore, and I'm an LA-based community organizer with Hand in Hand. Hand in Hand is a nationwide network of paid and unpaid family caregivers and also individual employers of home care workers. Usually older adults and folks with disabilities are part of our organization. And we fight for all of us to be able to live and age with dignity at home and in our communities. And I'm grateful for all this group is doing to support the people in your lives and also the family caregivers around you, and we're right there with you. And so as part of our work at Hand in Hand, we are collaborating with the UCLA Labor Center to conduct research on the private home care market and also on board and care facilities in California. Our hope is to survey about 350 consumers or employers, folks who are hiring home care or have their families in board and care facilities. And we want to understand why you and why they make the choices they do about hiring and employment in home care and care facilities, how much the support is costing them, and also to hear their vision for the future of long-term care. This research is important because we know very little about this part of the long-term care world. There's data collected on people who access IHSS through the government and also on nursing home facility residents, but there are many people, as this group well knows, who are in the middle, maybe who are not wealthy enough to afford things like long-term care insurance and need to spend down all savings to be able to access those supports. So we want to really be able to fill in the gaps and help use this survey as an effort to create a better long-term care system that works for all of us. So with all that said, here's how the survey works. It takes about 15 minutes to complete online, and it can also be conducted over the phone. The information collected is all completely confidential, and anyone who's eligible and completes the survey receives a $10 Target gift card. And here is where you come in. So, in the context of this world that we're in, it's been really hard to reach folks who we're trying to get to take the survey. And again, those folks are individuals who employ home care on the private market in California, or individuals who manage care for relatives in 6-bed board and care facilities. And we're trying to reach about 250 more people in the next 2 months. So we would love your support in completing the survey yourselves if you fall into those categories, sharing it with your communities, whether that's people you know in your life or maybe a Facebook group that you're on that convenes family caregivers, via email, via text, however you are in touch with folks in your life. So we would really appreciate your support on this. And I think I've shared some of the survey information with Amy, and maybe those details can go out. I can also drop a few things in the chat if that is easy and useful. But thanks so much for your time. And I'll also drop my contact information if there are any questions that come up. I'm always happy to talk more. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Kayla. Yeah, and you can go ahead and put the information in the chat also. This is huge. This is really, really important because this kind of is looking at family caregivers who basically are reaching their limit a little bit, and they're having to have respite. They're having to pay for in-home caregivers, right? When it's separate from IHSS. Or the board and care home. It's specifically residential board and care homes.
That's right.
Not any other type of assisted living.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be really interesting. I look forward to seeing the results on this.
Yes, thank you so much. We'll make sure to share our findings with you all.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and lead into our presentation. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you guys see the PowerPoint? All right, so the topic today is managing chronic issues using the Nagi model as a tool. I forgot to add the slide introducing our team. I wanted to introduce our case managers, Olga Yamawaki, Michelle McGuire, and Valerie Moreno. Thank you everybody for either attending live or watching this recording, which we'll post on our Family Caregiver Support Center YouTube channel. Okay, so aging, we are aging from the day we're born. Where does the decline start? Does it start in our 20s, our 30s, our 40s? A lot of people, when they think about aging, they think of old people. But really aging starts the day we're born. Every day, every year we age. There's natural, normal aging changes that occur. Most of those normal aging changes occur in people's 60s or so, but there's some changes that start happening as early as 30s for women in particular. They start to lose bone density, which is why it's so important for women to do exercise, and especially resistance training, because resistance training is the only thing that keeps you from losing that bone as you get older. Resistance training is the only thing that actually builds new bone. So there could be things that happen in our as early as our 20s that can exacerbate those normal aging changes later on. We'll go into more details about that. There's acute and chronic conditions, diseases, disorders that we deal with throughout our lives. Some of us earlier in life, some of us later in life. Some of those things you can prevent and some you cannot. And then of course, being a family caregiver can also add to the difficulties of these things as they come up as we age. So these are some of the common chronic and acute conditions during each decade. In our 20s, that might be when we have injuries, car accidents, injuries from sports, surgeries. That's when people might start to gain weight, obesity, addictions, mental illness. So those are things that can happen in our 20s that can be acute or chronic conditions. In our 30s, again, illnesses, allergies start to build up, asthma, osteopenia, arthritis. Osteopenia is the precursor to osteoporosis. And these are things that I actually researched and looked up. These are the most common things that happen in each decade. In our 40s, high blood pressure, high cholesterol is pretty common, especially with men. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes particularly, and then osteoporosis becomes pretty common with women if they don't exercise earlier in life. Arthritis, depression, and cancer is the most common starting in people's 40s. And then in our 50s, chronic stress, heart disease, which is still the leading cause of death for everybody, men and women, heart attack, stroke, kidney disease. And then congestive heart failure is common because of the heart disease and heart problems, high blood pressure, all those things. Half of those diagnosed with CHF die within 5 years. That's a huge statistic. And that's all part of the heart disease being the leading cause of death. Medication side effects, infections, shingles, mild cognitive impairment, dementia, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's they all commonly start in people's 60s. And then 70s, 80s, 90s, 100s, that's when people become more frail. As they get older, they lose their muscle, they lose their bone mass. And then major depression becomes pretty common because people at that age lose a lot of people in their lives. People who die that are close to them, they lose their independence. Their not able to do things they used to be able to do, maybe to relieve stress, like exercise and eat healthy, things like that. So these are the normal aging changes that occur. These are universal, inevitable, and irreversible. The central nervous system, that's the biggest one that gets affected. There's decreased functioning in the central nervous system. Sarcopenia, that means decreased muscle mass associated with aging. And then body temperature is affected. There's decreased ability to regulate body temperature. Lung and kidney capacity decreases. Sensory systems are affected. So vision, hearing loss, touch, there's decreased pain sensitivity. Taste buds are affected. So people, that's why you see your grandparents adding more salt and sugar to their food. There's a reason for that. There's a physiological reason for that. So the intensity of each of these things that happen naturally as we age depends on our lifestyle choices and on our environment as well. So what makes getting older difficult? Acute and chronic problems build up each decade. Each of those decades that I went over, imagine all of those things by the time we're 70 and 80, they start to build up and then they start to interact with each other. It becomes difficult to manage all of those things. And then being a family caregiver makes it more difficult if you're dealing with those things. And then factors that can improve this situation or can make it worse. Our lifestyle choices, our healthy lifestyle choices improve those situations, and then unhealthy lifestyle choices make it worse. And then our environment, sometimes we have control over our environment and sometimes we don't, but that also can improve our situation or make things worse. So how do you cope with the building up of these acute and chronic issues and keep them from affecting each other and keep them from interacting? The main thing is to manage current chronic conditions. So whatever, if you have a diagnosis, make sure that you're managing that properly, make sure that you're regularly seeing your doctor. And then you want to stop acute conditions from becoming chronic. So if you've had an injury or need surgery, you have some kind of limitation, make sure you're doing your physical therapy and continuing your exercises so that it doesn't turn into a functional limitation or disability. Or if a cold becomes pneumonia, that can be common too as people get older. And you want to add healthy or positive lifestyle choices and reduce the unhealthy ones. And you want to either stop or slow the progression to chronic diseases or disorders. Osteoporosis, arthritis, things like that. There's a lot of those chronic conditions that are actually preventable. So we're going to talk more about that and how to do that. Change the environment if needed and if it's possible. So we're going to be going over the Nagi model of disablement. It's actually Nagi. I've always called it Nagi because when I first learned about it, that's what everybody was calling it. So Nagi model of disablement, Dr. Saad Nagi, 1965 is when he developed this. It's a visual of a person's pathway to disability. A lot of physical therapists use this as a tool. And it begins with a pathology or a diagnosis of something, of a disease. It could begin with an illness. It could begin with an injury, inactivity, an unhealthy lifestyle like smoking. So you can kind of build this visual model with any of these things as a start to this possible pathway to disability. And the impairment that follows the pathology, it can be a direct result or an indirect result. And you'll understand that more as I go through each one and actually show you the model. The functional limitation, your normal ability to do things is restricted slightly. So that's before the disability. And then the disability, it affects a person's roles that could be at home, could be at work, community, or even leisure. If somebody goes out on walks every day and meets their friends out on walks, that's their leisure activity. But if they're not able to do that anymore due to like a hip surgery and they didn't take care of it, then that becomes a disability because it's affected their leisure role. Family caregivers, if they're not able to perform a certain task, like maybe help their loved one bathe, that whatever has happened is a disability because it's affected their role as a caregiver at home. So this is something I found online where it shows different definitions of each of the impairments, functional limitations, according to people's ages. So we have a 20-year-old female collegiate basketball player, a 35-year-old male roofer, a 35-year-old female lawyer, and a 70-year-old retiree who volunteers regularly at a homeless shelter. So that's his role in society. So the active pathology, let's look at the 20-year-old and the 35-year-old. They're using the same active pathology. So a knee ligament sprain. For the 20-year-old collegiate basketball player, they both have the same impairments. So they're both having knee pain. They're both having limited range of motion. And they're both experiencing quadricep weakness. Their functional limitations are the same too. Like as it becomes worse, they're not able to squat or kneel or climb stairs or jog or jump. But then when it gets to the disability, that's when it changes for each person because the disability is according to their role and why it then becomes a disability. So this 20-year-old collegiate basketball player, it becomes a disability for her when she's unable to play basketball anymore. She's unable to go to classes without using crutches. And if she doesn't fix it, it'll be a permanent disability. But this is something that can probably be healed and fixed. That's why this one would be considered an acute pathology. And then for the roofer, he's unable to work as a roofer. He can't play on the floor with his kids. He can't maintain his home garden. So it kind of goes through each of their roles that this might affect and interprets how it's a disability with each of those things. And then further going into detail about the quality of life and what that means for them. And then for the lawyer and then for the 70-year-old, there are different types of pathologies. These are more chronic conditions, so irritable bowel syndrome, early stage Parkinson's disease. So with the impairments, you see how it kind of starts as far as the symptoms and what they're experiencing. And then the functional limitations are really when it starts affecting them in their daily life and their daily activities. For the man with Parkinson's, the biggest thing is probably not being able to maintain his balance. And then for the woman, she can't sit for long periods of time. She can't concentrate for extended periods of time. And when that becomes a disability is when the lawyer isn't able to either work anymore or work as productively. Like maybe she has to take a lot of time off. And then for the 70-year-old with Parkinson's, he's no longer able to do what he loves, his volunteer work, serving meals at the homeless shelter. So that'll be a huge thing with affecting his quality of life. So hopefully this makes sense a little more. So here's the visual pathway that Nagi created as this model that we could see something become a disability. So we have the pathology or lifestyle factor or inactivity that leads to impairment, which leads to functional limitation, which leads to disability. And there's no, the time frame between each of these things, it differs and it varies for everybody. But the way that you can prevent something from progressing to the next level is to implement interventions. So for arthritis, it's been proven in research that exercises, say if somebody has knee osteoarthritis, if they do exercises that strengthen the muscles around the joint, it can actually decrease the pain in the knee. So an intervention would be hip exercises, strengthening the muscles around the joints, quadricep and hamstring exercises. And then the functional limitation, as that pain increases, maybe somebody is not as active, so they start to gain weight. So it increases the pain even more. So then it affects them functionally, where maybe they're not able to stand up from a chair, or they have difficulty walking. You know, as that progresses and they start to gain weight, the intervention would be some kind of weight loss through nutrition added to the exercise. And then to prevent that functional limitation from getting worse to a disability, for something like this, usually a professional level intervention is necessary, like physical therapy, because they do a lot of the compensation correction, and they can teach you how to use things like a cane or walker, things like that. All right, so now if each of you want to unmute yourselves, because I want this to now be a discussion where you're bringing in your own ideas. Do we have anybody else on the call? Because I can't see, because I have it in full screen. Can you guys see if anybody else has joined?
Alicia is here.
What was that?
Alicia Cunningham is here.
Oh, good. All right, so if anybody wants to participate in this discussion, go ahead and unmute yourselves. So the first pathology we're going to go over is hypertension. And let me see if I can do the annotation so I can add in the text. All right, so hypertension or high blood pressure. Oops. Okay, so first let's go through the pathway to disability. What would be an impairment from high blood pressure? Any guesses? First of all, what is high blood pressure? Does anybody know? It's the force of the blood pushing against the walls, the arterial walls and the blood vessels. If it's too high for long periods of time, long term, then you're diagnosed with high blood pressure. And they actually don't know what causes high blood pressure. It could be genetics, it could be your nutrition, it could be if you don't exercise. Somebody could be born with just more narrow vessels or arteries, and that's how it could be genetic. So, and like I mentioned before, it's typical to be diagnosed with high blood pressure in your 40s. So if you are diagnosed with it, no matter what the cause, it's really important to add an intervention. So as far as an impairment, high blood pressure, when you have high blood pressure for a long time, when you have that extra force just constantly pushing against your blood vessels and your arterial walls, it starts to break things down. It starts to create inflammation. So the first thing that kind of happens, and that's why they call heart disease the silent killer, because we don't see these things happening in our body. But with high blood pressure, when you start to experience inflammation or slight tears in the vessels, or because there's so much force, and when it's long-term like that, it could be, if you think about the surface of your body, when you bump your arm and you get a bruise and you get inflammation, you see that. But with high blood pressure, you don't see that, but the same thing is happening inside of your blood vessels and your arteries. So what we could say first as far as the impairment is inflammation. Okay. So then what could be a functional limitation that results from that high blood pressure that might cause inflammation? So with high blood pressure, which is sometimes the cause is high cholesterol because of the buildup in the arteries. So when you have the buildup of the plaque and things in your arteries, what it does is you have that arterial opening, and when you get plaque buildup, there's things that are blocking, so it shrinks it, so it's increasing the force of the blood going through. So what happens sometimes with high blood pressure, the plaque will get broken off, and the plaque will go through the bloodstream, and it could end up in the heart or the brain. So what happens is somebody could either have a stroke or a heart attack. So that would be the functional limitation. So let's say stroke. And with stroke, there's different levels of that disability. If you catch it early and get to the hospital and you go through treatment right away, you don't have as serious disability. But if you're kind of late on the treatment of it, people could have more serious disability. Their entire one side of their body could be paralyzed. So there could be different levels of the disability. But stroke inevitably will most likely cause some kind of disability. I would say the most serious that could happen is vascular dementia. Vascular dementia is a specific type of dementia that's caused from a stroke. So when somebody's diagnosed with high blood pressure, let's go through the interventions. What do doctors tell people that they can do to help with their high blood pressure?
Alter their diet.
Yeah, that's huge. Nutrition. I had, what was that?
Exercise.
Yep, exercise. I had a client that I worked with who had high blood pressure, and he did some reading about it, and he had high cholesterol, which was causing his high blood pressure most likely, and he added oatmeal and mixed with the ground flaxseed, and he started eating that every day, and that was the only thing that he changed, and he didn't increase his blood pressure drastically. I don't know what it is about oatmeal, but to me, I think it's the miracle food. I eat oatmeal almost every day. So my exercise physiology always said it was the miracle food too, to eat oatmeal every day. But there's something about certain foods that improve different chronic conditions. It's pretty amazing. It always helps to do research on these things. So if somebody's getting inflammation, sometimes if people have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, Some people get what they call peripheral arterial disease, where they might have swelling in their legs. So it'll be visually noticeable, visibly noticeable. So their legs will get swollen, maybe their arms or their hands will get swollen, maybe at night when they start going to sleep or when they're sitting there watching TV, their arms fall asleep or their hands fall asleep because there's that extra inflammation inside. But particularly in the legs, you can see that sometimes, especially if somebody's not exercising because they're not getting that circulation in the blood. So if that's the case and you start to see those visual signs or experience those other signs like the limbs falling asleep type of things, that means you're getting some pretty serious inflammation. So what do you do to prevent that? A lot of times people are on medication at that point. So that's a big one here to prevent a stroke. My grandma, who's passed away now, but she had high blood pressure. High blood pressure runs in my family. So even with how healthy I am, I could end up with high blood pressure just because it runs in our family. Genetics is a huge factor in high blood pressure. My mom had it. Pretty much everybody's had it in my family. So my grandma had high blood pressure, and I would tell her, Grandma, you got to take your medication or else you're going to have a stroke or heart attack. And she said, I don't care if I die. I hate taking that medication, la-di-da-di-da. And I said, Grandma, it's not that you're going to die. You'll be disabled. I mean, I hate that I predicted this, but I predicted this, you know. You'll be disabled and end up in a nursing home for probably years before you die. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. She had a major stroke. She ended up having to go into skilled nursing and was there for several years before she died. So medication is huge at this point. You have to take your medication. That's probably one of the most important things. And then add the other healthy lifestyle changes. And then once you do have a stroke, if that happens, some strokes are more serious than others, get that immediate treatment. Go to physical therapy. So keep those things up. All right, so let's go to the next one. Have to exit this, it looks like. So we can move to the next screen. Annotate. Well, I pushed, there we go. Okay. Oh, this was an interest, I need to clear all this annotation. All right. This next, I found this online too. Hypertension or high blood pressure, a lot of things are happening inside the body. The brain is affected. They've actually found that the blood-brain, what do they call it? Yeah, blood-brain barrier of the brain is affected. So that's why mild cognitive impairment happens sometimes with high blood pressure. The heart, all of these cellular changes are happening inside the body. It affects every single system, your metabolism, your endocrine system, renal, which is kidney, right? Vasculature, immunity, inflammation. So there's a lot of things going on at the cellular level as a result of high blood pressure. Just imagine that force on the blood vessels. And the blood vessel, they're throughout your whole body. That's how we get our blood is our life. So imagine that being affected and that constant force on those, and that inflammation is just going to increase, and it's going to affect every system in the body. So I had another, I wanted to go through another scenario, but We only have about 20 minutes left, and I still wanted to go through SMART goals. So I'm gonna let you all choose. I was either gonna go over type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, which it's more similar to blood pressure, and then weight gain or obesity. Are there any of those that, or I can do an unhealthy lifestyle factor like smoking or drinking excess alcohol or inactivity? Are there any of those that any of you want to go over?
I would say like obesity, maybe.
Okay. Do that. All right. So, obesity. What's the first thing we should do? Let's start with the intervention. Because if somebody already knows they're overweight, they already know that they need to exercise or any kind of physical activity. There isn't any going on. Improve nutrition. Because if we don't do that, then what's going to happen? There could be several impairments, either indirect result from obesity or direct results from obesity, and continuing to gain weight and not managing. So,
Having a heart attack is one of them.
what was that, Valerie?
Having a heart attack.
That would be further down. There would be something in between heart attack. So we could say high blood pressure here again, and then heart attack here, and then that could cause some type of disability, if not death. But yeah, since we already went over high blood pressure, high cholesterol, what's another impairment? We were going to go over diabetes too.
Diabetes.
Yeah, because type 2 diabetes, people are at higher risk of getting type 2 diabetes. So you could do that and have like what could be the beginning. You could put at the beginning as the pathology. You could put either one of those as a pathology, but if obesity is the primary factor in causing that, like maybe the doctor thinks that, then you could put that here as the impairment. So type 2 diabetes. So then you're having to manage 2 conditions. And then the functional limitation, there are a lot of things. The combination of obesity and type 2 diabetes, it could be pretty serious. And that's the thing, when people start to get multiple serious chronic conditions, it becomes really difficult to manage as they start interacting. So when I was researching diabetes, as far as impairments and or functional limitations, people have neuropathy in their feet. They have visual deficits, so their vision is affected sometimes. That's why people with diabetes have to get vision tests every year. And then mild cognitive impairment is another one. It's really important to control. We can put down here, control the blood sugar, either through diet or taking medication, insulin. Because if we don't, we can choose one of those functional limitations. So I actually had a client that I worked with who had neuropathy, and he managed it pretty well. He exercised, his nutrition was great, he took his medications, so it hadn't become a disability yet. He would sometimes get the foot drop. That's kind of common. So neuropathy is something that can be kept at bay if you manage it, you know. If you don't, that can quickly turn into a disability where people can't walk or they have difficulty walking. With diabetes, a lot of times people have to have their foot or their leg amputated because they're not getting enough circulation. So with the intervention, a lot of times physical therapy is necessary, medications, regular doctor visits. So all of these things, like I said, once something becomes a functional limitation, there's a lot more professional intervention and healthcare management and intervention when that happens. Otherwise, if you don't have that, things quickly can become a disability. So let's say here, just the most serious thing possible, amputation. So do you kind of see how that pathway works and how seeing this visually, it can help you to manage these things a little better. Whoops. Let's clear these. And get out of this annotation. And then I had a couple more slides with these. You could go through, you can also do it this way and go through each decade, like if something happened in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and then kind of go through where you're at. Are you at just the diagnosis right now? Are you at the impairment? Are you at the functional limitation? And you can list all of whatever you're dealing with. So then you want to look at your quality of life and what you want to improve. Your quality of life is basically how good or bad a person's life is. And the purpose of focusing on your own quality of life standards is you're able to improve your coping skills with some of these things you're dealing with, accommodate for aging changes, accommodate for that building up of those acute and chronic conditions and keeping them from interacting. So these are some different quality of life measures. Do you want to improve your relationships with your family or friends? Do you want to improve your finances? Do you want to improve your overall health or specific aspects of your health? Do you want to add leisure activities into your life or hobbies? Do you want to improve your living environment? And then you go through each of these things and you rank what is most important to you. So that's what you can start with when you start looking at your goals. And then you can kind of break things down this way. So if you've chosen, okay, I want to improve my health. Okay, what part of your health do you want to improve? There's these different dimensions of wellness. Do you want to improve your physical, your social, your emotional, intellectual, spiritual, vocational? And vocational could be your caregiver role. Do you want to improve your role as a caregiver? And then these are general goals that you can set. So if you want to improve your physical health or manage a chronic condition, okay, I'm going to schedule a doctor's checkup. I haven't seen a doctor in a while, so I'm going to schedule that. Okay, I'm going to exercise. So you can make them really general like that, if that's what's going to get you to do it. Or, you know, with the social part, I'm going to visit with a friend, either in person if you see them all the time or on Zoom. So these are different general examples of each dimension of wellness and setting those goals. All right, so SMART goals are specific, they are measurable, they are achievable, they are relevant, and they are time-based. So to make it more specific, if you wanted to get healthy or do more cardio, to make it specific, I'm going to walk more, or I'm going to walk at a faster pace. That's specific. and measurable. It can be exact or estimated. I'm going to walk 10 minutes every day if I'm only walking 5 right now, or if I'm not walking at all. And then to be achievable, you have to have those tools necessary to do it. So in this case, you have to be able to walk, and achievable also can depend on the weather. Make sure it's not during the winter and it's not snowing outside. If you want to start lifting weights, you have to have the weights or the equipment or access to a gym, things like that. Relevant in this case, we're making it relevant to one of the dimensions of wellness we're targeting. And then time-based. For family caregivers, it's probably best to just set it for a week, maybe 2 at the most, and see if you can achieve the goals in that week. And if you can't, then just adjust it, modify it. That's what's good about SMART goals, is you're constantly looking back at them. It's a dynamic process. You can adjust or change them at any time. So I asked each of you to have a SMART goal ready so that we could go through this. I know, Valerie, yours was getting more sleep. And then
Yeah, I was getting more sleep.
Okay, and then Olga and Michelle, what were yours?
Mine is to be more active.
Mine is to drink more water.
Okay, so which one of those do you guys want to go over? Because we got about 10 minutes left.
I think Valerie's sounds kind of interesting.
Okay, more
We
sleep?
can go over mine.
Um,
I think
Okay.
we all want more sleep.
Everybody needs more sleep, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll go through all of them. So my specific goal was that I want more sleep, that I want to have 8 hours of sleep each night. And then the measure, I would measure by how many hours of sleep I got every night. So in order to do that, I said that I would wear my Fitbit, to bed in order to track how many hours I slept each night. Or if you don't have a Fitbit, you can just, calculate it yourself. If you fell asleep like at 10 and whatever time you woke up. And then to make it achievable, I wanted to get enough rest to have enough energy for a busy day of work or a long day. And then relevant, in order to have 8 hours of rest, my sleeping schedule would be 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And I would put all electronics away. So I would put away my cell phone, my iPad, put away the remote controls. I don't have any distractions and I can just, lay in bed. And then lastly, the time-based, my goal was, to try this out until January to see if I can get 8 hours of sleep, this whole month of December.
Okay. So let's apply that to a dimension of wellness. You said you wanted more energy. That's the main thing.
Yeah, I wanted more energy to, be able to have a busy day throughout the week.
Yeah. Okay. Through better sleep. What would you think that would fit under as far as a dimension of wellness? Would that be more, would you consider that more physical or emotional?
I think physical, because I feel like if you're not getting enough rest, you're going to be tired, you're not going to have energy, you're not going to be, in a positive mood, you're going to, just be groggy.
Okay. So that's what we mean about being specific. So let's look at measurable. Measurable, you all you need to do for measurable is put your goal, what you want your goal to be. 8 hours of sleep every night or average?
Every night, yeah.
Okay, every night. And then as far as it being achievable, all of those things you said about how you're going to do it, you can list those all here. Like, how are you going to make that achievable? Turning off your electronics, the TV, all of that stuff. So that's how you're going to make this achievable. And then also, the through your Fitbit, and kind of that as a tool to make you accountable to something, you know, that is measuring your sleep. And then relevant. So we can just put that down here. So the sleep is relevant to your physical health. And if you want to do two that you want to focus on, you could also put emotional, whatever else you think this goal will be relevant to. And then time-based, you're going to work on it through the beginning of January, you said?
No, through December and up until January.
Okay, so it's best to put a specific amount of time, so you can say 4 weeks here or 5 weeks, instead of just saying, oh, until this month, just so you have the number of weeks. So do you want to say 4 or 5 or 6 weeks?
4 to 5 weeks would be fine.
Okay. All right. So that's how you kind of go through that on your own with the goals and break it down. All right. Where are we at on time? I think we're pretty much close to being done. Does anybody have any comments or questions about either SMART goals or the Nagi model and how to use that as a tool? And then I wanted to go over this too, so that you as case managers also can go through this with your clients if that's something that they want to do. So, but that's the end of my presentation. If nobody has any questions or comments, I can go ahead and stop the recording. I think. Oh, here we go. Thank you, everybody, for attending and watching today. All right, that's it. Let me stop sharing my screen. Whoops.